Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for joining today's session, Building Advocacy Capacity for OER. I just want to remind everyone that the conference code of conduct is in play. If you have any questions, you can look at it. It's located on the conference website. I'm now going to hand it over to Hailey.
Right. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to find a place for my water. Hi. So good to have you all here. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Is that and online sounds okay as well? Awesome. Excellent. So my name's Hailey Babb. Like I said, I'm an open education program manager with Spark. Assuming most people are familiar with Spark, but in case you're not, we're the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition, and we're a membership organization of libraries across the US and Canada, but we also have affiliate networks in Europe, Africa, and Japan. And what we do is promote open education research and do basically a lot of policy advocacy work in both the education and open access space. So I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about building advocacy capacity for OER. A preface to this presentation, I'm going to cover a lot of material. This is based off of a new program that we're working on developing at Spark. It's called the Spark Foundations and Advocacy Skills Program. We're piloting it right now. We're in our sort of second iteration of trying to get that off the ground. But what that is a 4-week program where we try to equip librarians and academic professionals with the skills that they need to, be advocates for not only open education, but also with particular regard to inclusive access programs and how to advocate for student protections, that sort of thing within institutions where those kinds of programs may be existing or imminent. So what I'm going to try to do is try to take 4 weeks of content material and cut it down to a 1-hour session. I'm going to breeze through this. I'm so sorry. I'm going to throw a lot of stuff at you. I'll post the slides afterwards, and I'll try to do my best to make sure that we have some time at the end for questions. But just keep that in mind. You don't have to grasp everything right away. This is just to sort of give you a taste and get you kind of in the mindset of thinking in the advocacy perspective going ahead. So who the heck am I and why am I qualified to talk to you about this? Before I worked at Spark, I was president of my student union in Canada, actually. I'm based in Edmonton, Alberta. I'm not sure if we have any Canadians in the room, but woo, yeah, love it. Student government is they take it really seriously up there. It's a full-time job. You're only allowed to take 1 or 2 classes. You have an office, you get paid a salary, and you get like formal government lobby training. So we did a lot of like actual lobbying work, not only at our institution, but like provincially, which is our equivalent of states. This is also a picture of me on Parliament Hill, Ottawa, which is like our Capitol Hill, doing advocacy there. So hopefully I've picked up a thing or two in that process and can share that with you today. I do want to preface, I think I have a slide about this, but the focus of today is not going to be on lobbying. Lobbying is a part of advocacy, but we're not going to be talking about like specific government lobbying. This is going to be like, how do I, take an idea or something that's important to me and bring it forward to a decision maker in my community, like an administrator or something like that. So government lobbying is a whole different beast. And obviously Canada's rules are very different than the US. So I'm going to leave that to all you Americans. So what is advocacy? In a nutshell, advocacy is taking some sort of action to influence change. So that could mean a lot of different things. Okay, I guess we're going to do a little preface right before. Sorry, I'm reusing an old slide deck. Before we get into that, I also want to address a little bit about the inclusive access issue itself. So again, assuming that people know a little bit about this, but I'm just going to go over it to make sure that we're all on the same page. So when I'm talking about inclusive access, what I mean here is basically a textbook sales model that's offered by a few different publishers, wherein these 4 bullets apply. So when your institution signs a deal with a publisher to do a inclusive access program, they receive digital access by day 1, and students are directly billed for the cost later. They may have the option to have a print rental, but that's more often than not offered at an additional cost. Full access typically expires after the course ends. And of course, these are using, all rights reserved copyright, wherein publisher retains, private authorized use of that. Whereas opposed to OER, which I'm sure we're all familiar with, students do still have digital access by day one at no cost to students, and their access is free forever. It never goes away. Students do have the option to choose a low-cost print option if it's desired. It's not limited or, restricted by anyone. Students can retain access to that material forever, even post-graduation, and they're openly licensed, so faculty can adapt those to local needs. And the reason I did inclusive access in quotation marks earlier is at Spark, we personally don't really see these programs to be all that inclusive. This is a term that the publishers use. A lot of different orgs will use things like automatic textbook billing to describe these programs. We definitely use that as well, but just for the sake of terminology today, that's what I'm going to be using. Within these inclusive access models, there's typically two different ways that they're delivered. So you could see an example where these programs are delivered on a course-by-course basis. This is where, a student may be enrolled in one course that's using a program like this. So they'll be billed the actual cost of their materials for that course. More often than not, it's voluntary for faculty to participate in, but that obviously varies very much depending on your situation. And the opposite of that, or not the opposite, but the other model of that is what a lot of companies are marketing as equitable access, wherein all students are paying a flat fee to be part of these models, regardless of what the actual cost of their materials are. So if you're, for example, a student that only needs one textbook, but you have like a professional program student who needs a lot of different $300 textbooks, like maybe you're a lawyer or a dentist or in those schools, they're going to be paying the same. These are more often than not outsourced to one vendor, and faculty often don't have a choice about whether or not they can participate. So just a little bit of terminology, laying expectation of that going forward into the presentation. Okay, back to advocacy. So in the program, we teach advocacy by using this framework that we've sort of put together. We by no means have like any, there's a lot of different ways to do advocacy. This is just the way that we like to do it. And this is how we have been, trying to describe it when we teach that advocacy course. So whenever you find yourself, looking to do advocacy work, you're going to start with defining what your problem is, articulating what your solution might be, setting some advocacy goals, and then developing strategies and tactics to make that goal a reality. So I'm going to go through and define exactly what each 5 of these mean. Starting with problem and solution. And I'm just going to fix the mic here. All right, so what is the problem with the status quo that keeps the world from being how it should be? What's the broader change that could be made that would solve the problem, and why is this important right now? We get people to do this exercise because it just sort of gets you thinking in this mindset about how things should be. When you are able to sort of articulate this for yourself, you're better able to articulate it to a decision maker. So somebody perhaps with more power or access than you who can influence a decision, you're able to better explain to them why this is important. And of course, in the full week version of this, we do examples and we run through and we give feedback. But again, you guys are just getting the 1 hour quick notes version. Oh, here's an example. So for example, students are borrowing more than ever before to pay for their education, that should say. So as a result, millions of borrowers each year are struggling to continue with their education, make important investments, and even pay monthly bills for living expenses. So in a nutshell, school is too dang expensive. Not news to anyone. The solution is that students should be able to afford their college materials without having to, mortgage or finance their future. Moving on to goals. So we've established what the problem is. We've established how that should be corrected. Let's set a specific goal to try and get to that reality. So a goal can be defined as the specific proposal or change that you want to make that advances the solution to the problem. When you set an advocacy goal, there's a few things you want to keep in mind. And I know the SMART model for goals is well played out, and I know that we're all aware of it, but I think particularly in advocacy, it is quite important. So that's why we include it. So it's important to note that an advocacy goal is not something that you have the power to change yourself. If that's the case, then that's still great, and those are things that you should do, but it's not what we define as advocacy per se. So you are setting a goal that somebody else will hopefully deliver, something that you can't. So your goals should be SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, of course, is the SMART model of goals. Moving on to strategies and tactics. So this is where strategies and tactics can get a little confusing. They are slightly different, but for the most part, they serve the same purpose. So a strategy is your theory for how you're going to bring about the change that you seek to achieve. And a tactic is a specific action that you're going to take to implement your strategy to achieve your goal. So let's see, I did have some examples in here. I think we took them out. A strategy may be something like, let me think for a moment. Like, I would like to convince, X governing body to pass a resolution that's to say that they're in support of this issue. That might be a strategy. A tactic might be, I'm going to pick out some specific people on that board who I know, maybe on my team, and perhaps make sure that I can see them in the elevator on the way to the meeting or something like that. You know what I mean? Something a little bit more targeted and specific. We're not going to worry too much about this for the purpose of today's session, but I just wanted to introduce the concept. When you're developing a strategy, you want to identify how the change that you identified in your goal gets made and what's the process for doing so. So say my goal is I would like to establish an institutional OER grant program. I need to find out exactly how that might happen. There might be multiple ways that that could happen. But in a slide I'll talk about later, it's important to bring solutions forward. The less work that you can be making somebody else do is going to be much easier for somebody to say yes to you. So if you come forward with a full plan, say, I've investigated it, here's exactly how it may work, that is probably going to work in your favor rather than saying, hey, I'd really like to implement this program. Can you figure out how to do it? And can you also do it? When you're thinking about this, you also need to take a moment to identify who these people are that you're appealing to. So who are the decision makers in this situation? Who has the power to change these things? And I'm going to talk about who they might be in just a couple slides. But most important is going to be who or what could influence them to want to make this change. And a quick way of saying that is really just what's in it for them. Why should they say yes? This is where it gets super interesting, and we'll go into that more in a little bit. At this point, you also want to take sort of a general inventory of your environment. So who or what do I already have at my disposal or on my team to advance my advocacy goal? What specific resources can you use to your advantage that you may already have? Who's on my team? Who can I recruit? So let's say you have a certain faculty member or librarian or like some other ally who is really, really into this cause and may have some sway with some other folks. That would be a good person to recruit onto your team. It's always best when you are trying to advocate to admin or, a department chair, whoever it may be, if you can bring multiple people forward who are representing multiple different, aspects of things going on, that's going to be far more powerful than just being one voice. So are there people are interested in this, or who may be already working on this, who you can pull in? What specific resources can you use to your advantage? So this may vary depending on, where you are. You may have access to a budget, you may not. For example, like if your goal is to implement some kind of program, do you have the staffing and resources to support that yourself? You probably don't, and that's why you're doing the advocacy. But, if there are things that are available to you, do take stock of them and have that in your mind when you go ahead. I like this slide. This is the strategy scale, we call it. So when you are approaching somebody, obviously there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's a happy middle ground in the amount of pressure that you want to apply to somebody. And this is something that you really only learn by, being in these situations. But advocacy is not going to be effective if you are simply just creating a climate where somebody might be likely to do something. So, for example, an example I like to use is like running a survey. So say that you would like to run a survey of, course material affordability at your campus. That may be something that you already have the power to do yourself. So that, in that sense, that wouldn't be an advocacy goal. Maybe you need to have permission to do that. That would be an advocacy goal. But you can do fantastic work, and I want to preface, I'm not saying that this is not good work to do. It's just not necessarily advocacy. You can do a fantastic job of sending out a survey, putting together an amazing report, letting admin know of the state of course material affordability on your campus, and that is going to be essential. I absolutely think you should do those things, but simply writing the report and putting it on somebody's desk and hoping that they do something with it is not going to be quite enough. So that's where we need to apply pressure a little bit. So we can persuade them to do things, we can incentivize them to do things, and we can pressure them to do things within reason. You're going to have to, get a sense of when it's going too far, because if you go too far to the other end and you kind of start to admonish people or shame people, that might be where you get into breaking down the relationship territory, and we don't want to do that. Advocacy is a long-term practice. It's not a one and done initiative. It's not like most of the time you're going to get no's, and that's just something that advocates need to be prepared for. But it's about, how can I recalculate and how can I re-strategize? And okay, if you say no to this, what is something else I can do that might get your foot in the door? And then we can work up to that. So make sure that you're just keeping in mind how much or little pressure to apply. And what's in it for them? How can you frame what you want to be something that they want? So if this is, somebody who's looking for a special project to take on that's going to make them look really good to their boss and they're excited to do that, let them run with it. One of the difficult things about being an advocate is you do have to get really used to not taking the credit for things and letting other people shine. That happens a lot with politicians. But it'll happen in this environment too. Like it's quite likely that, if you pitch an idea, do a lot of the groundwork, and somebody higher up than you takes it, runs it, and announces it, that might happen. What's important is that we, are moving the initiative forward and getting that implemented. So I would like to add a whole another section to this presentation about like self-care and self-preservation for advocates, because that's a real thing. There's a lot of emotions that go into managing that, but yeah, I would need a whole other presentation for that. Okay, so I said earlier we would talk about identifying who some of the decision makers are. Let's just do a quick show of hands, either in the room or online. You can just shout out who might be some people who are in this world, like some people who might be a decision maker that you would talk to. A provost, faculty, your dean for sure. Students, yep, they're involved, absolutely. Politicians, academic senate, I see in the virtual chat. Academic affairs, lobbying office. Definitely, yes. These are all people who are somewhat peripherally involved in this game to some extent. So this is just an example list. This is not by any means comprehensive, but this is just to get you thinking. Here's a list of people who have some form of skin in the game going ahead here. So out of this list, I'm going to ask you all to sort of identify like who it's, let's say you want to implement a new textbook affordability program at your campus. Who's going to be somebody who might be an ally to your cause? And again, we can just popcorn shout it out from this list. Librarians, definitely. Yeah, parents, students, faculty. Yeah, amazing. Cool. This is a lot of this is context dependent. It depends on what campus you're at, but generally these may be people who could be on your side, and this is where you kind of need to do the environmental scan work to gauge that. So, again, a lot of exceptions to this. Likely students, librarians, parents, teaching and learning, instructional design are going to be, all for this. Publishers, IA software vendors are not going to like it because they want to sell their products. So again, very general. Within this, we also have two categories of decision makers and influencers. So decision makers are going to be people who have the power to make decisions that will help you move your cause forward. Influencers are going to be people who have pull or sway with the decision makers. So let's do a really quick popcorn round of decision makers. IT, that's correct. Faculty, administrators. Oh, interesting. Institutional lawyers. Definitely. Okay. How about influencers? Students, big time. Yeah. Instructional design, I see in the chat. Amazing. Yeah. Cool. So again, some gray area here depending on where you are. Don't take this as like a hard black and white rule, but generally this is kind of what you can expect. Excellent. Okay, so diving a little bit further into understanding the motivations of decision makers. How's everybody doing? This is a lot of information. Okay, thanks for bearing with me. I wasn't kidding. We're gonna fly through this. What are the goals that this person is trying to achieve? What does success in their role look like to them? And how or where might there be some overlap in your goals? And how might you work together towards a shared vision? So think about, where this person might be at personally, like put yourselves in their shoes for 5 minutes. What might they need in order to advance themselves in their career that would make them look good, help them look brilliant, be something that's incentivized, going to be a good thing for them to say yes to. And this is where you can kind of get into like, what politicians are like notoriously known for, being like, oh, this could be really good for you, but it doesn't always have to be slimy. But like seriously taking a minute to get in their shoes and say like, like, are you looking for something to make you stand out right now? Are you looking for like, anything related to that? Important to take stock of that. I have a lot of slides. Developing your tactics. Who or what among your allies and resources is most likely to influence your decision maker? And what specific actions can you take to put your allies and resources to best use? I think we'll skip that one. This is super important. So touched on this earlier before, but very important to make it easy for people to say yes to you. The easier it is for somebody to say yes to you, the more likely they're going to say yes to you. So make them look fantastic. Frame it as a championship opportunity. Like, can you say like, we can put you up for this award if this goes forward, or like, I'm sure like students would really love this. I know students in this particular discipline are really struggling with this, and this could really win over your support from, it could be anything. You know your environment best, and you know what the specific challenges in your institution are. But frame it as a championship opportunity for them and be okay with sharing the spotlight. I said that earlier, but a lot of times things are going to go forward and you may or may not be the one who gets to take credit for it. Lastly, and most important, do as much groundwork as possible so the ask doesn't make more work for them. That's pretty self-explanatory. So there we go. That's a very quick run through. Back to the framework again, we're working up at the top of that problem, having a very high level overarching idea of what the problem is, knowing how to articulate the solution, and then going into our more strategic steps. So let's see the framework in action. Here's an example. So problem could be, that problem statement I read out to you before. Textbooks were expensive, et cetera. The solution is to expand the effective use of OER to benefit students. A goal might be to establish a statewide OER grant program. A tactic or a strategy could be to convince some sort of coordinating board or, body with influence of the return on investment. And a tactic could be, for example, gather savings data from faculty to inform their decision. A way that you can tell, so when we do the program, this particularly the last three can get kind of convoluted and confusing. And again, because we only have an hour, I'm not going to get super into it. But a way to test if you're sort of doing these in the right order is using the in order to test and starting at the bottom and working back up. So saying, I'm going to gather savings data from faculty in order to convince the coordinating board of the return on investment, in order to establish a statewide grant OER program, in order to expand effective use of OER to benefit students, in order to solve my problem. Okay, so that is, how much time do we have? Oh, I'm actually doing really good for time. Wow. Are you guys like, okay, I sped through that. Okay. That's the program in a nutshell. You just got the 20-minute version of it. I want to take a little bit of time now to talk specifically about inclusive access, which is why I'm sure a few of you are here. So again, we took a little bit of time defining exactly what we mean when we say inclusive access and what those programs look like. How can we protect the progress that we've made with our OER work in light of these programs and continue to advance our OER work while these things are happening on our campus. So let me see. These are some of the sort of like talking points that you can use. So refuting IA does save students money. Prices may be less, like the number one thing that you're going to get marketed to with an inclusive access program is like, long story short, we're saving students money. Our concerns with this are, one, the fact that students in many, if not most cases, are losing access to these materials at the end of their semesters in many cases. But also the fact that, for a lot of students, particularly with equitable access programs, they are actually being charged more than they might be if they're in those disciplines that use fewer materials. We often, there will be a talking point as well about how savings from switching to print and digital are moot because students can already choose digital. A lot of ways, almost everything is available digitally. It's not necessarily a new innovation. Publishers will also talk about their materials being below market rates. This always makes me laugh because they set the market rates. Particularly in the US, where there's, three major publishers who are kind of having a effective monopoly, not whatever the equivalent of monopoly between three is, for publisher prices. So the goal of this is really to eliminate the secondary market that students rely on, like borrowing from their friends, getting a rental option, buying a used textbook, that sort of thing. So below market rate is going to be for new textbooks only. And a discount off of a publisher price list is not necessarily meaningful to a student if they're going to continue to resume the historical price increases that we've seen. We've seen the price of textbooks inflate. I think the stat is, don't quote me, but like 300% times the rate of inflation over the past 10 years. So, obviously there is a history of this going on. It is more equitable to refute IA. So savings are mostly for students who would normally buy a more expensive option, like I mentioned earlier. Students who typically rely on borrowing, used books, et cetera, can actually be paying more. Day one access at a fixed cost is equal but not equitable. And switching to digital oftentimes introduces new barriers, including internet access, device age, accommodations, et cetera. And this isn't to mention like the restrictions that they may have on printing or that sort of thing. Refuting IA can offer options to more students. So the opt-out processes for these programs can often be complex and are often not, super well communicated to students. But not only that, like if a student is opting out of a program that would give them access to the required materials to complete their homework and get a grade, that's also problematic for students as well. On to my next point, opting out isn't always an option for students when the materials will include their online homework. As well, offline reading and long-term retention is often limited, and offers of print upgrades are often limited. So if you are in a situation on a campus where your campus is being approached by a publisher to implement an inclusive access program, you may or may not be invited to take part in those conversations. But if you are, or if you are able to contact somebody who is in conversations, these are the questions that we recommend that you ask. So we want clarity on, what the methodology is being used to calculate the advertised savings. What is exactly the research that you're using to back up these claims? Who is asked? Are they students who typically buy full price books or not? How do the prices compare to the current used book and rental market? That will often also be omitted. As well, how long will prices be guaranteed? Is there, an inflation cap? Is there anything in place that's going to prevent them from raising prices each year? Is there peer-reviewed research to back up their student outcomes claims? Like sometimes there will be claims about how inclusive access programs improve student success. We would just like to see that and know what they're coming from and know exactly where that claim is coming from. And then there's also a whole nother ballpark that I'm not going to get into today is concerning student privacy and student data. We would like to know whether their company monetizes student data. We'd also like to know how they are using student data. And I could do a whole other hour presentation on that one as well. However, I also want to encourage people to think bigger about course materials. It's not just about, pushing back against this. We want to have good solutions as OER advocates as to why OER is a good solution and why that should be implemented instead. So we want to convince people that it's important to make decisions that align with institutions' interest with those of students and not the textbook industry. Are students really the ones who want this? Are they at the decision-making table of implementing these programs? Is this something that they're calling for, et cetera? We also want to consider, market dynamics and long-term implications rather than focusing only on procurement. So like a lot of institutions did make the switch to these programs during the 2020 full switch to online, and rightly so. Like it was tough. We needed a quick fix, and I get it. Like things were very hard. However, we just want to make sure that people are not being, locked into contracts that are going to inflate year over year, that sort of thing, and to know if you are locked into a program, what exactly does that mean for you in the long term? And then we want to encourage as well leaning into open educational resources as part of a sustainable digital infrastructure. So how can we, build a reliable repository, whatever like area for getting these that is going to be an adequate replacement for a program like this. Like we also want to make sure that things are easy for faculty to adopt, easy for our students to use. That's important as well. So how can we be improving our OER programs to fill gaps that may exist there? So what are some things that you can do? We want you to be proactive. So make sure that your admin, faculty, students are aware of the OER initiatives that are happening on campus. You folks are all doing fantastic work and you should promote it and you should make sure everybody knows about it. So make sure that students are aware of these and why it has an impact. And I hope that you have, student governments that you can rely on to help communicate that message as well. Asking questions, challenging your campus to thoroughly examine the legal, financial, and ethical implications of new models like inclusive access. And you can use some of the questions that we talked about on the slide previous. Be super rigorous anytime claims are being made. Ask to, see the backed up evidence, research numbers, everything that's going with that, and center equity at the middle of this discussion. So at the end of the day, like the people who are benefiting from this the most and who are using this and who are, going to be affected by this on a day-to-day basis are students. And there's always time to talk to students. people who are in a rush to implement this, like admin may not always, see that right away, but if there's a way that you can elevate a student voice, get them to the table, facilitate them writing a letter, something like that, that's always extremely, extremely powerful. Let's see, some strategies that have worked. So student pushback mobilization. Students are incredible. When students are able to coordinate and work together, a lot of really fantastic things get done. And I know I'm biased because I was did the whole student thing, but that's extremely powerful. And if you are able to do like any kind of coordinating where you can get student groups to sign on to a joint letter or do anything together that's like facing the decision maker, that's going to sway them. If you can say, hey, it's not only me and my 2 library colleagues, but it's the student government who represents, 10,000, 20,000, whatever amount of students. Calls for more rigorous study or review, slowing down to take some time to review what exactly is happening on your campus. This is an important one because I think oftentimes the student affordability issue can be like, I want to be careful how I word this. I think everybody cares about the student affordability issue, but when you hear it over and over again, people kind of get numb to it, right? It's like, oh, well, we know school is expensive. We know this. It's always been the case. It was like that when I went to school, blah, 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 blah. But I found in my experience as a student advocate, if I had much better luck going to, a decision maker and saying, yes, school is expensive. It's particularly expensive for these reasons on our campus. And here are the particular people who are suffering. And here is particularly where relief needs to happen. That's way more powerful and way more likely to get attention, especially if that's never been pointed out to them before. That's probably something that they don't want to, have out there and want to get addressed. We encourage people to talk also about questions about overhead and margins. So I think it's not a secret that like when institutions sign deals with these programs, that there is like a cut that goes to the institution, and that's a lot of times that can be used for good. We just want to make sure that that's the case. Where is that money going? What is it supporting? Can it be reinvested back into OER programs? Can it be directed towards student affordability in any other ways that way? Those are questions that we can ask. Depending on where you live, you may also have some legislation about like fee authorization. So for example, in the province of Alberta in Canada where I live, there's a legislation that says that you can't charge a new fee to students if you're the institution without like a student referendum, which is really great, and we're lucky to have that. You may have something similar where you live. I'm not sure. You would have to sort of liaise with a government person on your campus who might know things about that, but that might be something to look into as well. Concerns about student data privacy, again, not going to get super into that, but there are, of course, a lot of things that happen there. And examine relevant governmental regulations or institutional policies, like things that may have an impact on this that could slow it down. If you are fighting a flat fee equitable access program, some things to fight for could be exempting courses using 100% OER or zero cost materials from the fee. This is going to ensure that you're not undoing your progress and replacing like materials that are already being used in classrooms. One way to frame this is just saying like, we've invested a significant amount of resources into this program already, a ton of staff time. Hopefully that's something that is going to resonate with them. Like, we don't want to undo that progress. It's done a lot of really great work. Here's the impact that it's had, and here's the risk that introducing a program like this could have an impact on. Again, I talked about that sales commission. Is there a way to recommit it to funding OER? And then use actual student spending data to verify that the flat fee really is a better deal for students. So this is where, that having that individualized feedback from your community is going to be very helpful. Okay, I'm going to wrap up with just some like quick advocacy tips. I see I'm at 40 minutes. We've got about 15 left. So let's see if I can stretch this for 5 minutes and then go into 10 minutes of questions. Really quick, obviously, when you're doing advocacy, you're asking somebody for something. You're going to get a yes, or you're going to get a no. You might get a maybe we'll see. If you get a no, that's okay. It's going to happen more often than not. And that just means that we have an opportunity to redirect, refocus, move on to the next thing. So always take a moment to sort of play out these conversations in advance. Think about how they might go and be prepared with some backup asks, perhaps something smaller that they may be more likely to say yes to. If you get a hard no, again, you can kind of go back to that like pressure scale that I showed and kind of determine like how hard the no it really is. But if it's very serious, you want to refocus the conversation by asking how you might work together instead. We want to maintain that relationship with that decision maker person. That's the biggest thing. So working together, framing it in that way, like what is something that you would be interested to agree on. Another reason, I can't remember if I mentioned this before, but another reason why we have you go through and articulate that problem statement right at the very beginning is because in situations like this where you get a very firm no, it is very easy to go back and say, okay, well, do you agree that this is a problem? And if you've made your problem statement broad enough, they should be able to say, yes, of course that is a problem. And then go from there as like your anchoring point where you agree and try to see exactly how far that aligns down the road. Let's see. Again, be careful about pushing back. If it begins to feel tense, ask if you can follow up later. Usually better to re-strategize than risk deteriorating that relationship. Oh, that's what I just talked about, focusing questions after no. So do you agree that this is a problem? That's a great way to recenter everything. Are there any circumstances under which you could see yourself supporting this? Is there a possible way to get you to say yes? What proposals would you support to address this problem? Or, one way to take a meaningful step in the right direction is blank. Would you support that instead? If you get a yes, that's great, but it doesn't end there. Take yes for a yes, but don't keep trying to convince them. Say thank you, move straight into next steps, take it and run. If it's appropriate, it's always nice to send a thank you note. Like I know it can be, it's polite, but it's also a great way to memorialize the yes in writing. Like there is a strategy behind that. If you send them an email immediately after and say, hey, thank you so much, really enjoyed this meeting. Here's what we agreed to, looking forward to meeting on next steps. You've got that in writing. Don't assume that yes means done. So they may have agreed to something, but now it's your responsibility to follow up and to be annoying and to be pestering and make sure that that actually does get implemented. And I know that that's a lot of work, but sometimes that is necessary. Also very important to follow through 110% on what you promise 100% of the time. So be very careful about what you promise, only promise what you can actually commit to, and make sure that if you do agree to something that you follow up on it. Okay, and then this is my like attempt at summarizing like the whole self-care thing I was talking about into one slide. But I want to leave you all understanding that advocacy is very much a long-term practice. It's a one and done, not a one and done initiative. You are always going to have to be re-strategizing, refocusing based on, whether or not somebody tells you yes or no, but also changes in your environment. Like I used the COVID example a while ago. Like that's obviously a pretty major change in the environment that's going to have to, adjust your advocacy strategy. When you get a win, celebrate it. Like sometimes that can be hard for people. I'm one of them. But make sure that you sit down and take a moment and say, wow, that was a lot of work and I got them to say yes. And that seems like a small thing maybe, but it's really not. It's a big thing and you should be really proud of yourself and you should take a moment and recognize that because, like I said earlier, when you get that yes, you're going to be on to the next thing of making sure that that goes ahead. But just do take a minute and make sure you acknowledge that moment. And then just generally take care of yourself. Like this is a practice where, all of us all of us are familiar with advocacy to some extent. Like I think we may not consider ourselves to be like formal advocates, but I think all of us who are in this work do this, and all of us, you know, can resonate with a lot of these things that I'm saying. Um, so, you know, take care of yourself. This is like a marathon, not a sprint. You're gonna get a lot of no's, you're gonna get a lot of rejection. You're all probably familiar with that, but keep in there, and when you need to step back and take a break, do that. It's long term. We're always thinking long term. That's it, I guess. Um, this is my email. If you ever want to email me about anything, I'm happy to chat. And then I wanted to share a resource at the end. So this is US specific, but it's our OER state policy playbook. So you can go to the Spark website, enter this URL, and what this is an example like policy menu, I guess you could say, where we have some like ideas of things that you could ask for to be implemented at your institution. So like, I think there's one in there about like course marking and how to go about that, and you know, different things there. So I just like to always recommend this as a resource at the end of my sessions if that's something that you want to go in and explore more. And that is the end of my slides. Does everybody hang in there? Yay, thanks for bearing with me. And I have 10 minutes for questions. That was awesome. So yeah, happy to stay and chat for the next little bit. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Heather. I'm an open education librarian, and so I do a lot of advocacy work at the school level at our university. I'm always trying to get people to join our team,
Mhm.
our open education initiative, basically. Um, and it's pretty hard. Do you have any advice on trying to get people, like other people, to become advocates and like encouraging them to do that?
Are you talking like a group of people specifically, or just?
Just individuals.
Um, yeah, I mean, like very general advice is just like I go back to like the what's in it for them thing. Like, why is this something that's important to them? Why is it something that they should care about? Like, obviously, for a lot of students, that's going to be the affordability piece. For faculty, it might be like having the flexibility to, you know, uh, have your own content, or include like more equitable examples in the lecture, like having more academic like control over that. Um, I think just sort of like putting it out there wherever you can. Again, I know that that's a lot of work on you, but people also tend to respond well to like seeing others celebrated for things. So if there's like somebody who is doing this and is doing a lot of work, like can you be celebrating them at faculty meetings and giving them recognition? Like can they be put in the like weekly newsletter of whatever for, you know, congratulating them for whatever work they're doing on adopting OER. I think a lot of other people will see that and get interested. I think for people who I had like, I don't know if this answers your question. I had a really weird experience one time where I was a student advocating for this and giving a talk, and I had a new faculty member, brand new, come up to me after the presentation and went, "Oh my gosh, I've never even heard of this. I feel so bad I'm not using it. Like, is everybody else doing this and I'm not?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, that's totally not the case." But that gave them the impression that they obviously really resonated with it. And so just, I guess, catching people at the right time. Like advocacy is so hard. It's so black and white. It's so gray. It's so context dependent. I can't really give you, you know, super concrete advice for that. But I think the number one thing is just go back to that. What's in it for them? Why is it important? And try and go from there.
So there's a question online.
Mhm.
Can you speak a bit about advocating to legislators? What sort of issues are folks advocating in this room? Guessing that this is in the state playbook. Could you share examples?
Yeah. So like what kind of things are people advocating for right now? Um, so I'm going to answer this as a Canadian. Unfortunately, I just have less experience with the US. Something that we're asking for right now, or, you know, would be really great for us to have, in my opinion. So you folks in the US have a federal grant called the Open Textbook Pilot. That's something that we see and are very jealous of and would love to have for ourselves. So some kind of like federal funding there to help implement these programs at institutions is going to be super important. Canada's also unique because we, all of our educational decisions are made at the provincial level. There's no national body for education, which is weird for us. So depending on what province you're in, you know, they're going to be making decisions about like requirements for course marking, requirements for like disclosing prices of textbooks, that sort of thing. So another thing that I'd really like to see in Canada is our federal like statistics agency, Stats Canada. I'd really like to see them collect Canadian data specifically, because when I'm doing lobbying in Canada, I'm using US data because we just don't have it. So things like that, having good data, having money, having resources, having like, you know, maybe there's some sort of like appointed chair and cabinet that's responsible for this sort of thing. Those are just some things going around. But again, it's very dependent on where you live, very dependent on, you know, what state, what country you're in, et cetera.
Hi, my name is Alyssa. I'm a librarian at the University of Hartford. And I'm wondering, it sounded like doing something like an environmental scan is a really important first step to not be wasting your efforts.
Definitely.
So can you point us toward any resources for how to do one of those properly?
Oh, a specific resource. I mean, I can share my slides. I don't have a specific resource. I'm so sorry. I'll post the slides afterwards, and I think I can add something in there that's like a list of, you know, particularly what you want to know is people, who's on your side, and then resources in terms of like, you know, one, money, but also like, do you have staff capacity? Do you have like a program that's already in play that you can be advertising, that sort of thing? Sorry, I don't have a specific resource for you. Thanks for asking, though. That's important, and I'm glad that you emphasized the importance of that. Yeah. Anything else in the chat? No? Okay. Well, thank you so much, folks. That was a lot of me talking at you, and you all did great. And I hope you learned something, and yeah, just appreciate you coming and appreciate that